And wait, let me see if it shows here. It's still loading. It shows here. Oh, there's my audio. There's no
Still
video.
loading. It shows here.
Oh, there's my audio. There's no
Still
video.
loading. It shows here.
Oh, there's my audio. There's no
Still
video.
loading. It shows here.
Oh, there's my audio. There's no
Still
video.
loading. It shows here.
Oh, there's my audio. There's no
Still
video.
loading. It shows here.
Oh, there's my audio. There's no
Still
video.
loading. It shows here.
Oh, there's my audio. There's no
Still
video.
loading. It shows here.
Oh, there's my audio. There's no
Still
video.
loading.
I mute the damn thing.
Alright, so you're getting audio through YouTube, right?
No, I didn't open YouTube yet. But it says that it's online and 2 people are viewing it, but who?
Yeah, they get a notification as soon as you go online.
But you know what's the problem? I don't see my screen.
On YouTube?
On the restream.
Alright, let's see it.
You're supposed to be...
Go back to OBS. Alright, let me see the full screen. Oh, there you go. Alright, you see where it says cut and transitions? Just hit cut. There you go. Alright, go to restream. Yeah, that should click over in a second. There you go.
And then that's live right now, right?
That's live right now. So there's this video that Jim and his team put together. And it's basically a loop audio file that says board meeting will start at 5 p.m. And it should be in that email if you want to download it so it's not just showing that screen.
So you know what? I'm gonna stop the stream.
No, don't stop it.
No?
Nope. Just keep it running. And you could cut it back to a black screen if you want. The only thing is the way that it's set up, he has everything scheduled. So if you stop streaming, then when you start streaming again, it'll come up as a different meeting. The next meeting that's on the schedule.
This stupid Jim.
Right. Like instead of just scheduling stuff, it's like, why not just, put it in as that process for that event? You're not making your work any faster.
So I lowered the volume on this one.
Yep. All right.
But where's the video in the email?
Yeah.
Oh, but it's when it starts in 5 minutes, right?
No, it starts at 5 p.m. And that's what the graphic says, at least.
This is the video.
Yep, that's it. And then you can go and create another scene in OBS.
Here, right?
On the left? Nope, other one.
And then what?
And
oh, and then here, look it up.
Yep. You can do VLC video source or media source.
And then press loop.
Yep.
And then browse, downloads. And then open. So that's gonna be showing.
Yep. So you can hit cut.
This again, we're starting with the student performance.
Yes, Jessica's going to be showing it. If you're ready for it now, we can show it. Okay. Jess, you pull out the performance? We might be experiencing some little tech difficulties. Hold on one second. Hold on. We're having some tech difficulties, so I'll be broadcasting the video. Give me 1 minute.
All right, thank you.
Hold on. We're having some tech difficulties, so I'll be broadcasting the video. Give me 1 minute.
All right, thank you.
We're having some tech difficulties, so I'll be broadcasting the video. Give me 1 minute.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven. We lift the harmony, let our rejoicing rise high as the listening sky. Let it resound out as the rolling. Sing a song, roll up the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song, roll up the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun, a new day begun. Let us not shine till victory is won.
Great. Good afternoon. This is Linda Chin, your board chair, and I first want to recognize the students at the Baltimore Leadership School for Young Women and their director, Mr. Robert Meeks, for their performance of Lift Every Voice and Sing. Thank you. What an appropriate way to begin our meeting this afternoon. I'd also like to welcome you all to the public board meeting of the Baltimore City Board of School Commissioners. Just a reminder, if you are watching, please, and not a speaker, to put your phone on mute. At this time, I'm going to redo the roll call, and we will see which board members are present for this evening. A reminder to board members during the meeting and helping in terms of our minutes and recording, please, if you can, to identify yourselves. Commissioner Bondima?
Yes.
Great. Commissioner Griffin?
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner McFadden?
I'm here.
Present. Commissioner Reed?
Present.
Thank you. Commissioner Richardson?
Here.
Commissioner Roberts?
Hello. Here.
Okay. Commissioner Sykes?
Here.
And I am here. Commissioner Sykes, is that a sling?
I'm sorry.
Do you have a sling? Or
No,
is that
it's just a shirt. It's just the way the shirt is.
Oh, it's a beautiful shirt. Okay, I was
Thank
worrying. Okay, it's very nice. Okay. We have 8 commissioners here. Commissioner Brooks and Commissioner James are excused this evening. Thank you. Is there a motion to reopen the meeting?
So moved. McFadden.
Commissioner, is there a second?
Second, Robert.
Thank you. And those in favor, Commissioner Bondima,
Yes.
Griffin,
Yes.
McFadden,
Yes.
Reed,
Yes.
Richardson,
Yes.
Roberts,
Yes.
Sykes,
Yes.
and I'm in favor. Thank you. So this motion passes. And now, is there a motion to approve the prior open session minutes?
So moved, Bondima. So moved.
Motion passes. And Commissioner Richardson, was that a second?
Yes, it
Or did you
was,
vote
Madam
that?
Chair.
Thank you. Is there any opposition to approving these prior open session minutes?
Yes, it was, Madam Chair.
Okay, hearing none, seeing none, this motion will pass 8 in favor. Thank you, and 2 absent. Is there a motion to approve the closed session summaries? Hearing none, seeing none, this motion will pass 8 in favor.
So moved, Griffin.
Thank you, and 2 absent. Thank you. And the second? Is there a motion to approve the closed
Richardson.
Those in favor, Commissioner Bondima?
So moved, Griffin. Yes.
Griffin?
Yes.
McFadden?
Yes.
Reed?
Yes.
Richardson?
Yes.
Roberts?
Yes.
And I'm in favor. No one opposing or abstaining. So this motion passes. There's 7 in favor and 2 absent. Thank you. I want to inform the public about an update in the agenda for this evening in order to give commissioners more time to consider the feedback on the budget. We will be moving the vote to Thursday's special meeting. We will still proceed with the presentation tonight. And so I just want to let folks know that. And now I'm going to ask Commissioner Bondima to help me to introduce something. This is a recent positive bit of news about city schools that was broadcast nationwide. And Commissioner Bondima brought this to our attention, and I'd like her to present this, and then we'd like to share this with everyone. Commissioner Bondima?
Thank you, Commissioner Chair. I just wanted to share this with everyone, and maybe some of you have seen this video, or maybe have not, but it was broadcast on national TV, NBC, Lester Holt and Kirsten Welkin, and they talked about the reopening of schools, and we were lucky that they selected out of all schools around the country, they selected Baltimore City Public Schools. And I thought it was a very, very positive presentation. And I felt that, and I shared it with our chair and our assistant chair and our CEO, that maybe we should show it to the public for those of you who missed it. But thank you for showing it.
We will run the clip.
Assistant chair and our CEO, that maybe we should show it to the public for those of you who missed it. But thank you.
It's been 6 weeks now at Baltimore's Waverly Elementary and Middle School, where students are back in the classroom, complete with desk shields and face masks. It's been amazing. It feels great to have that feeling of normalcy again. Principal Dr. Tanya Green bringing back students 2 days a week in person. What was the initial reaction when you said we are returning to the classroom? The initial reaction just across the board, from teachers, school leaders, was just maybe apprehension. Parents like Sharice Cole were unsure.
Hello.
Believe like, okay, they got my daughter.
Right now there's a bunch of feedback in the thing.
When I was in virtual, it was kind of hard for me, and I was getting very frustrated. You were frustrated with virtual learning? Yes. Back in December, President Biden
I muted my computer, but it's still coming up.
The Republicans say he was not aiming high enough. Tonight, 65% of students attend schools that are fully open. Nearly 30%
Okay, back to you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. And I want to thank Commissioner Von Dima again for bringing this to our attention. Hope folks know Baltimore City Schools has been a nationwide leader with our reopening, and it is encouraging to see that the news is being spread. So, on behalf of the board, I want to thank our teachers, principals, administrators, custodians, food service workers, and other staff that have made this reopening possible. And we know that last week was Teacher Appreciation Week, so this was really an appropriate time for us to be able to share this. So thank you again. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Santelises for CEO comments.
Great. Thank you, Chair Chinya. And it is great to be here with everyone tonight. Greetings for the board as well. There is no PEP tonight, so I would like to dive right in if that's okay. And I'd like to begin this evening by recognizing an award-winning teacher from Baltimore City Public Schools, Mr. Charles Emerson, who is an ESOL teacher at Vanguard Collegiate Middle School. And last week, Mr. Emerson was honored as Maryland's Outstanding Middle School Teacher for this year's Financial Education and Capability Award. He was cited for his outstanding service in meeting the financial literacy needs of our English learners by helping them to understand financial management concepts and behaviors like budgeting, careers and income, credit, savings, financial decision making, and values and habits about money, something I wish I had learned much earlier than middle school. I understand that Mr. Emerson is with us tonight, and I would love for him to be able to come forward to say a few words about his work on financial literacy. So, Mr. Emerson, are you with us this evening? I see you, sir. And please, yours. Congratulations, sir.
Thank you so much, Dr. Santelises, and thanks to the board for inviting me. It's really an honor. I was really surprised and flattered to get this award, Financial Education Award for middle school. Honestly, when I think about financial literacy, I would have associated that more with some advanced math in high school. But the more I thought about it, I realized you got to start somewhere, and that's exactly what we're doing as a team with our middle school ESOL population. Specifically, I have the privilege to work with our newcomer class. So we have brand new immigrant students, many of whom are refugees, and really it's a pleasure to work with them. It's amazing to see the growth that they have. They come with no English and oftentimes very little math background, and it's just remarkable the growth that they have. And so one of the things that one of my favorite topics is money, financial literacy, because everybody loves that, and you can really tie that concept into all sorts of different math concepts. And so something that we do is, we start with the basics, identifying money and comparing money, doing computation, and we build up to where we actually go into the community. I have a lot of support from our team at Vanguard. I'm at Vanguard Collegiate Middle School. We got a great team of interpreters and paraeducators, ESOL teachers, and our regular content staff. And ultimately, what we do every year. This last year it has been an exception for everybody, but we go into the community. We go to Giant Food and do a lesson. They're really great. They let us kind of take over their store for a big classroom every year, and yeah, like I said, the kids love it. I enjoy working with them, and it's been a real privilege. So it was a surprise and an honor to get this award. And thank you all for the recognition.
I hope you can see all the applause, Mr. Emerson.
Yeah, thank you all so much.
Well, we just want to celebrate you and thank you for not only representing all of Baltimore City, but most importantly for what you represent. about our students, their capability, as well as just you preparing them and showing the best of Baltimore City public school teachers. So we thank you, Mr. Emerson, for all your commitment and work. So thank you again.
Thank you so much. Pleasure is mine. It's a privilege.
Great. I just want to also let people know that the Financial Literacy Awards are coordinated by the Cash Campaign of Maryland, the Maryland Council on Economic Education, and the Maryland State Department of Education. And once again, we just want to thank you on this great accomplishment and congratulate you on it. I am also pleased to report tonight that as of last week, we now have more than 23,000 students, pre-K through 12, who have returned for in-person learning. And the percentage of in-person students at each grade level continues to rise each week. In fact, we're now at just about 40% of students in grades kindergarten through second grade attending in person, and this was the first grade band to return in person. And in grades 10 through 11, which were last to return, we saw an increase of more than 4 percentage points in the first 2 weeks of in-person learning. This trend really does align with some of our original expectations as we have been watching since last fall when we first started slowly opening schools, and that is that as students participate in person and families see that our health and safety protocols are in place and working, more families are choosing the in-person option. And most importantly, I think when families see the significant improvement in their students' engagement and overall attitude towards school that I think we saw some of in the clip that Commissioner Bondima introduced and Chair Chinya framed earlier this evening, that overall engagement, their commitment to in-person learning really is further strengthened. So thank you to everybody for that work. I also want to thank everyone involved in the successful team effort to really keep our buildings clean, safe, and secure. Our in-school testing programs continue to show very low positivity among our students and school staff, and practically no in-school transmissions. Maintaining those types of consistently good results over time does not happen by accident. It really is the result of very hard and continual work every day by our custodial staff, the support of the full district operations team, as well as our school leaders and staff. I've had the opportunity to visit many of our schools over the past year and a half, and I will say that I have seen that our buildings remain clean and safe. I knew that our enhanced ventilation systems were working and remain confident that our health and safety protocols are continuing to be followed. At the request of the Baltimore Teachers Union, that we conduct safety walkthroughs, and the request they made was starting at buildings with the highest number of students in attendance. Even as we began those walks, we were aware of no significant health and safety issues in any of our buildings, and really because, frankly, there really have not been. But we did agree to accommodate the BTU's request, really in the interest of transparency for those protocols and practices. And I am pleased to report that we completed these walkthroughs at our top 30 schools with regards to attendance numbers returning last week. And as I expected, there were no significant issues. I appreciate the vigilance and extraordinary efforts of our operations team, our in-school staff over this entire year that really has brought us to this point. So thankful for that. As I promised at our last meeting, we are really excited about launching our Reconnect, Restore, and Reimagine website last week. And yesterday we held our first stakeholder feedback session to provide public access to our draft recovery plans and updates. Over the next 2 weeks, we will hold virtual stakeholder feedback sessions in every city council district at different days and times to ensure that everyone has an opportunity to participate. The meeting schedule is posted on the R3 website, and really want to encourage everyone to participate in this process. I want to thank a lot of our community partners who are also helping us spread the word so that we can get broad participation from the public. And I just want to encourage the entire city schools community, really to solicit your ideas, thoughts, and hopes for our young people. And as everyone gets a voice in the planning, visioning, and implementation of what truly is a very critically important plan. In early June, we want to share that input that we've gathered and post a draft work group plans, the draft work group plans on our website. And then this will be followed by additional stakeholder sessions through June to gather another level of stakeholder feedback, basically to tell us how did we do in listening and actually translating that into the plans for the next 2.5 to 3 years with the increased investment at the federal level, and most importantly, with a deep focus on this real pivotal moment of being able to ready ourselves to provide young people with what they need to return to school. In anticipation of those meetings, I would also just like to be clear that our intent really is to return to full in-person learning 5 days a week in the fall. This aligns with the Maryland State Board of Education's resolution of April 27th, which really does speak to the fact that all students have to have the opportunity and be permitted to attend school for at least 180 actual school days for in-person learning and in-person instruction. Now, I know our intent actually coincides with this resolution, but I really want to be clear that our goal is really based on the need to provide robust educational experiences for all of our students. And throughout the 2020-2021 school year, we've documented significant learning challenges suffered by many students who, for just a variety of reasons, were not well served by virtual learning. That was why we opened our schools to in-person learning as quickly and as safely as safety permitted. And the results we have seen, I have to say, really reinforce our belief that virtual learning is not enough for significant majority of our students. Overall attendance is consistently and significantly higher for those students who are in person versus those who are in a virtual environment. Most importantly, many school leaders and teachers that I have spoken with report the difference in student engagement and performance in person is like, quite frankly, to quote, day and night when it's compared to virtual. I can also say, as the mother of 2 city school 6th graders, I really can personally attest to the dramatic change that I've seen in my own daughter's engagement with learning and their overall well-being since they have returned to in-person learning. Now, that is not to say that we haven't learned from our experience in the pandemic, and that the way we educate our young people will not go back to the way that it always was, because it won't. We need to apply the lessons learned over the past 14 to 15 months and provide enhanced opportunities that utilize the flexibility made possible by technology investments and other innovations. Now, how we do that, what the in-person learning day and the overall recovery process will look like will be guided in part by verify the input received from stakeholders over the next 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks. But to be clear, learning will take place in person in school with teachers in the classroom every day. We are still discussing how a virtual option may be offered and under what circumstances, and a number of community meetings that I've attended when parents and families have asked this question. What I've been fairly consistent in saying, or have been consistent in saying, is we will have some type of virtual option, but it will not look like the virtual option this year. And I think with the good news today or yesterday, my days blend in, vaccinations now being approved and available for students from the ages of 12 to 15, in addition to 16 and above. We are also hoping that increased access to vaccination for families who wanted that. I've spoken to a number of families who have said, you know, if my child can get vaccinated, I'll feel so much better. And it's great to know that we're moving in that direction as well. So I would just want to, again, let families, let the public know. We have started talking to principals. I know the hybrid model has been very challenging for teachers, but we are very excited about moving in that direction and really continuing with our trajectory of keeping families, keeping children, keeping staff safe. And so I want to thank everybody just for the work towards the common good. And the common good here is to keep everyone safe, as well as to give young people access to the in-person learning that we know an overwhelming majority of them need. So that concludes my comments this evening, Chair Chinya, and I will turn it back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Santelises. And again, I want to encourage everyone, as you did, to please be a part of the opportunities to communicate and give feedback around what that plan will be. This is our chance to do that, and we really do need to hear from everyone. So thank you so much. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to the Office of New Initiatives for a presentation on the new charter applications for school year 2022-2023 opening.
Yeah, good evening. I'm Angela Alvarez. I'm the Executive Director of the Office of New Initiatives, and I'm joined today by Kim. And so tonight we're going to share the applications, just kind of briefly share a description of the process and the applications that we received. Just for the record, for members of the public, we want to be clear, there's a lot of components to the process on who participates in the review process. And so there are three key bodies that basically participate in this process. The first is our Charter and Operator-led Schools Advisory Board. Their role in this process is to provide initial advice to the CEO. They're an internal, external stakeholder group whose primary function is to provide advice to the CEO on issues related to charter and operator-led schools, as well as in this process. The next important party, of course, is the CEO. And so it's the CEO's job to listen to the advice of the advisory board, as well as the advice of staff, to look at any supplemental information provided by applicants. And then it's the CEO's role to finalize and provide the formal official recommendation to the Board of School Commissioners. And of course, that's based on a review of the applications, again, the advice of the advisory board, testimony provided by the applicants at the work session that's upcoming, any supplemental information provided by the applicant in the process. And then, of course, the role of the board. The board is the ultimate decider and has authority in making the decision on whether to approve the application. So the board will be taking into consideration everything that's shared in this process, and to the extent in which the applicant meets the board priorities, considers the testimony of the applicants at the work session, the supplemental information provided by the applicant, and the CEO's recommendation. So throughout the year, we provide a lot of opportunities to meet with applicants in preparation for applying. And so we, invite applicants to review applications and during COVID virtually when we're back in person. They can come and review, past applications. We go over, we answer any and every questions. We also host technical assistance sessions um, uh, with proposed applicants. We recommend that people attend their first time a year before they actually submit their application, and that they come again a second time in the same year that they're submitting. We also ask current operators who recently have gone through this application process as an applicant to participate in that technical assistance session to provide guidance and advice to applicants, and so we can hear directly from people who've experienced this process recently. And our operators are very gracious and often extend themselves as being available to answer or address questions beyond those meetings. On the 5th is when the letters of intent are due. And then the applicants submit their applications on March 25th. That kicks off at a clock. So the board must make a decision within 120 days of the receipt of that application, as required by state law. Once we receive applications, we do a technical review to ensure completeness, and we give applicants an opportunity to cure any weaknesses from a completion standpoint, to submit any missing materials. And then from there, it goes to our charter and operator-led advisory board for review and for interviews with the applicants. Tonight, we're presenting a summary of the applications that we received. We will share with the applicants the CEO's preliminary recommendations based on the steps that have happened so far on May 18th. And then the applicants will have an opportunity to make their case for approval to the board on the May 26th, as well as to cure any deficiencies that are noted in the recommendation. They'll receive that in writing, and we also meet with them on the 18th date. And so it gives them time to prepare for that. In that session, the board will, also be able to ask direct questions of each of the applicants. And the applicants will then again have until the 28th to submit any kind of final information that's needed to cure any final concerns that came out of that work session or were noted like in the CEO's preliminary recommendation. All that will be taken into account, and the CEO will finalize the recommendation. And so we will share, staff will share the CEO's final recommendation with applicants on June 7th. Again, that's both in writing and meeting with an applicant. And then June 8th is the night where the CEO present publicly those final recommendations that had already been shared with the applicants to the board, and the board will discuss those applications and then vote on whether to approve or deny applications at the public meeting. You're having an issue with your volume? Or other people having a hard time hearing you?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I am too.
Yeah.
Yes.
It seems fine now.
Is it better if I join audio through my phone?
Yes. Very clear.
Absolutely. But turn your volume down on your computer.
Can you get me there? Thank you. Okay. So in response to the way schooling has changed this year in light of just COVID implications on education, we added a few questions and adapted a few of our questions on the application for applicants to consider how changes to their academic plan to maintaining school culture and climate in a potentially virtual or hybrid environment would be maintained, and certain operational items like equipping staff and students with all the technology and tools necessary to having a successful school experience in a hybrid environment. So these were some modifications that were added this year to the application, and we also increased the page limit slightly to accommodate applicant responses. And this year we received 2 applications. I have a delay on my computer. The first applicant group comes from Life Preparatory Charter School, Inc. You can click ahead if you haven't. I'm not sure if there's a delay. So this group is proposing to open as a pre-K to 8 conversion charter by combining the current Mosher and Calverton school communities. Their application details a phased approach in which Calverton would convert to charter status in school year 2022-23, and the Calverton Mosher school communities would merge, and both have converted to charter status by school year 23-24. As a conversion charter, both schools would remain zone schools, and so there's no set cap, but the applicant group would hope to grow the current enrollment from roughly 700 students across both schools to over 1,000 students enrolled between the 2 campuses. The application proposes implementing a STEAM B curriculum, science, technology, engineering, arts, math, and business, that would integrate science, art, and entrepreneurship skills into the school's academic programming model. And they also detail a deep commitment to this particular community beyond the students they hope to serve. They reference in their application 3 fundamental pillars, being the whole child, the whole school, and the whole community. And so they propose to stand up an adult education program where the operator would offer professional development for parents, staff, and other community members to include courses in technology, financial literacy, workforce development, and other identified areas of need. And through implementing that broad programming, the team's mission is to create a movement that roots the West Baltimore community in knowledge, health, and wealth. Our second application comes from Shining Willow Charter School, Inc. And their application is to open a wholly new K-8 charter school in Northeast Baltimore. The enrollment in the school's opening year would be 208, and by year 6, they would grow to full capacity at 468. This applicant group proposes to implement a Waldorf-inspired curriculum that would infuse anti-racist education into the school's academic programming model. And some of the core principles of public Waldorf education that the application details include an arts-integrated, cross-curricular, and developmentally appropriate approach to learning with a particular emphasis on the social emotional needs of students. And the school would implement a signature practice of Waldorf education known as looping, in which students remain with a single main classroom teacher from 1st through 5th grade, and again with a new classroom teacher for 6th through 8th grade. Traditional Waldorf schools are private, and this would be the first Waldorf-inspired public school in Baltimore.
Thank you. We'll take any questions.
This is Vernon Reed. Hi, Angela. I'd like to thank you and your staff for your, Kim and the rest of the staff for your hard work. I've been up close and personal, so I appreciate your work ethic. I guess another thing that comes to mind is how comprehensive your presentations are and how in depth you go. And I guess lastly, I'd like to also recognize your advisory board, because you have a pretty deep advisory board, pretty diverse advisory board. And it's basically from the community, but they're experts from the community. So we have a good group of people on your committee or on your board that helps serve the whole charter school space. So I'm just thanking you and your team. A lot of people don't get to see where the food's cut, but you guys are doing a good job. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Commissioner Richardson, and then I see Commissioner Bondima after you.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I was really intrigued by the Life Prep Charter School, their model, their application. Um, the adult education portion of their proposal. How much does that factor into how we grade it? Like, are we just looking at their their not the adult portion, but our young people, or like how do you look at an application like that?
Yeah, I mean, the primary weight is on, the academic programming because that's the primary focus of the school. I do think we give consideration, if the applicant is proposing to do outreach to community is important. And so if they're proposing to do something, innovative there, I think we consider that, as well as, is there a plan there? But I don't think it has the same kind of weight as the primary mission, which is the academic program. But I think it's something that should be considered. Um, yeah, so I think that's a key thing. I think the other thing we didn't include in this presentation, but we'll make sure we include it going forward that we probably should have, is the board priorities. So last year, the board approved some priorities, and conversions is one of those priority areas around applications. So for conversion schools, for high schools that would provide advanced academic programming like IB or dual college. Um, let me do my cheat sheet. Sorry, I started talking about it and I don't have my cheat sheet in front of me. Um, to give you the list of things, dual immersion, dual language immersion is the other area of criteria. I think I covered all of them now.
So are you saying that you would provide to us where these schools check those boxes of our priorities?
Yes.
Thank you. That'd be great. Thank you.
Commissioner Bondima?
Thank you very much. Angela, could you do me a favor and put back up on the screen the slide that dealt with the school that's following following the protocol behind Waldorf? Oh, life prepared to public. Okay.
Not this one. The next one. This is the one. This is the Waldorf
Yeah,
one.
okay, thank you very much. I really will be interested in seeing the application for this school because Waldorf by chance is on right here in my development. And it would be interesting to see how or maybe you already know how closely they're going to follow the Waldorf uh, protocol, or the Waldorf packaging, how they're going to incorporate or integrate their program, or look at how their program is going into the charter school that they're applying for. Because there's some interesting things that I'm concerned with in order for them to be using their process. So have we looked at, or is Waldorf involved in this charter school?
The people that have put forth the application have deep Waldorf experience. So it's a large group of people. One of the largest groups of people we've met with. So and many of them have a lot of Waldorf experience and are currently involved in Waldorf schools, leading schools, or teaching in schools. You all will have the process of getting all of the applications loaded to you guys for board docs. So you'll have the applications to review in detail. And like I said, we'll be sharing the preliminary recommendation with the applicants on the 18th. You'll also get a memo with the recommendation. So you'll see what we're identifying through those review processes on behalf of the CEO as the major strengths and weaknesses of the applications. And so the 26th will be an opportunity for the applicant security deficiencies that we've noted. They've already gone through an interview process with the advisory board, and that resulted in some requests for additional information that they just provided to us on Friday. So they'll take into consideration of those things as well.
Okay, will you have the opportunity when you go through the process with them? Will you have the opportunity to do on-site tour of Waldorf School and see how they actually work? and to, just get a view of their process. Will you have that opportunity to do that?
They definitely invited us to do that, so we can, and we can, if that's something where we can figure out.
Yeah, I'd highly
One of the board members definitely said, "You can come see my school anytime." So we definitely have the offer.
Yes, I highly recommend it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner McFadden.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Alvarez. And um, I want to say your last name, Kimberly, but I can't see it anymore on the screen, so I'm just going to say the team. um, with the and it just moved off of my screen. With the Life Preparatory Public Charter School, it's not necessarily a question, but these are just thoughts that I'm having that hopefully you'll be able to take back to the advisory group about this particular community. So when I think about the historical nature of these two schools, um, it would just be nice to kind of hear how they'll preserve some of that history within their application process, and then also knowing that these schools are going through some physical updates and changes. And so there's a lot of instability for a myriad of reasons happening in that community, and I would just love to kind of hear thoughts around that when we're presented formally again in the process. I really think about that particular community and how they can, number one, maintain a lot of the historical context of those schools, but then also how would they be supporting the transitions that are happening on top of the COVID pandemic transition, right? But the physical building spaces and the transitions and the swing spaces and all of that, that's a lot for communities and parents and families to have to experience. So it's just a thought that I was having.
Yes, we will definitely address that, and I'm sure the applicant will address that. They're very aware of the changes happening. They're aware of the naming process. They've been in some of those meetings, so they're aware of all of those things and supportive of the naming. I think in the original application, it had the Life Prep as the name, but they're supportive of keeping the names that the Billie Holiday from Mosher that just got approved, and the Calverton name when it gets approved.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Griffin.
Yes. Hello, Ms. Alvarez and Ms. Coleman. How are you both? Good to see you. Thank you for the presentation. I agree with Commissioner Reed. You all are always so succinct and thorough in everything you present. I really appreciate that. One question that is going through my head right now, as far as the Life Preparatory School, being that their curriculum will be based on STEAM B, is if they have included in their proposal, and I know we'll see this, with how they plan to partner with any businesses, organizations, social entrepreneur enterprises in the area, to be able to pull some partnerships into the school, if that's a part of their plan or not. If they've listed that, I'd be curious to see a list of who they are planning to partner with for some of that work. And then for the other portion, the adult education piece, I was just curious to know what adult education programs may already exist in those neighborhoods, if any, to see what kind of gap they would be filling there, if they are. So those are just two curiosities I have. If we could have that information, it would be helpful.
We will provide it.
Okay. All right. Are there any other commissioners have question or not? I don't see any hands. So Ms. Alvarez, Ms. Coleman, thank you so much. As you've said, we are in the midst of the timeline. We'll be getting more detailed copies of the plans and have additional time to continue to put questions forward and also to meet the applicants. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So, fellow commissioners, I'm going to now review. I know we're a few minutes early, but I'm going to go through the review of the consent agenda. I think that will be on track in terms of public comment time. And if there are some things that you would like, an item you'd like to have pulled, please remember to state your questions so that staff can be prepared to answer them. Item 8.01, I am pulling, and that is so that our student commissioner can vote. But does any other commissioner have a specific question on item 8.01 that you would like to have in addition? One, two. Okay. Those were gifts. Okay. I'm as we said earlier, item 8.02, we are going to have the presentation. That's the item that lists for the budget. So we will have a presentation for that. So that's also pulled. So I'll read the remaining items that are for your input. 12.01, supplemental instructional materials.
Madam Chair, I'm hearing some feedback. I just want to make sure that we can hear you clearly. Okay, that it seems to be fine now.
Okay, just a reminder, folks, if you are not, unless you're me at this point, you should be muted. Thank you. Thank you. So I'll say that one again. 12.01, supplemental instructional materials. 12.02, the Villa Maria School. 12.03, NCS Pearson. 12.04, Youth Works Program.
Yeah, I'd like to pull that, Madam Chair.
Okay, and your
I guess
question?
my question's about the job placement participation.
Okay.
That number.
Okay.
I would hope it's higher, but I'm sure there's some reasons.
All right. 12.05, University of Virginia. 17.01, Scribble Software. And 19.01, Youth Opportunity Academy. Okay.
Well, I thought that was 1204. That's not 1204?
Youth Works is 1204. The Youth
Okay,
Opportunity Academy is another item.
Okay, that's the one I meant to pull. 1701. I'm sorry.
Wait a minute.
That's the one I meant.
You mean 1901?
1901. The Youth Opportunity Academy.
Yes. Yeah, I got my use wrong.
And the question is around job placement and participation, right?
Correct.
Okay. All righty.
Thank you.
No problem. Okay. I will, following public comment as usual, I will come back to see if there are any additional items that folks want based on the public comment. I believe that our first speaker is here, so I'm going to move into public comment. Speakers from recognized groups will have the opportunity to speak for 5 minutes. And our first is a video. So our first speaker will be Corey Gaber, representing the Baltimore Teachers Union.
Good evening. My name is Corey Gaber, and I'm a middle school literacy teacher on external assignment and a vice president on the B2 Executive Board. City schools will receive a total of $689 million of ESSER 1, 2, and 3 money on top of typical revenue streams. Obviously, chunks of this money are restricted for particular purposes and pandemic expenses. Still, there remains an unprecedented amount of money available to reconnect, restore, and reimagine significant portions of how we do schooling. Tonight, I'd like to focus on one of those areas, summer recovery. I'd like to applaud the district on many aspects of their Summer 21 plan presented on April 27th. There's a clear commitment to expanded, holistic, and interesting programming. Alvin Ailey Dance Camp, Baltimore Urban Debate League, CTY, STEM, Ingenuity, Freedom Schools, Arts Integration, and more. This is a major improvement from the past when, frankly speaking, summer learning was a clear example of educational apartheid in Baltimore City. Segregated Black classrooms would experience intense ELA and math interventions, constantly being assessed using boring text excerpts specifically designed for standardized test score improvement, with repetition of state standards galore and the threat of expulsion for poor behavior habitually hanging in the air. Meanwhile, a diverse set of young people coming from disproportionately middle-class homes would have summer learning experiences full of field trips, cross-curricular, arts integrated, project-based learning, infused with autonomy and choice. Having personally taught over the summer at Bell programs as well as partnering with young audiences in Maryland, I've seen the full spectrum of possibilities firsthand. BTU and the board's shared desire for it to offer rich, engaging, and joyous learning experiences to all of our young people will face an opposing pressure to use evidence-based interventions in order to close achievement gaps. While such ed reformy language sounds nice, what it translates to on the ground is narrow math and English lessons, always framed from a deficit perspective, pointing out one's gaps relative to other students, and the most test-heavy, boring, and scripted of schooling. This makes sense given the Academy's history of white supremacist thinking, the eugenicist origins of standardized testing, and the near impossibility of conducting randomized controlled trials in authentic learning environments. Of course, it's also worth mentioning that after 2 decades of educational policy instituting this logic, we have not seen any significant shift in outcomes. Students who are disengaged, experience school as a boring struggle, will not be motivated to return by a doubling down on the pedagogy of poverty. These are the students who need the dance, robotics, music, and creative writing that rich parents choose for their own kids. These are the types of experiences that alter what school even is in the minds of young people and instills an intrinsic motivation to engage further rather than remain disengaged. So let's continue this most welcome push towards holistic and joyous learning. And the greatest of intentions and programming options will be meaningless unless we have staff with the knowledge, relationships, and desire to run these programs over the summer. Sadly, in Baltimore City, we have long neglected the employees actually doing the work with young people. For decades, we've been paying educators $30 an hour for summer school. This is insulting when considering the following. Peers in Baltimore County will earn more than double that after negotiated incentives are incorporated using ESSER funds. Prince George's and Montgomery counties pay their employees an hourly rate based on their regular school year salaries. For comparison, our model teachers and other veteran RSPs earn the equivalent of over $70 and even $80 an hour when translating their regular school year salary. Summer school pay in Baltimore City hasn't changed since at least the year 2000, and if we simply accounted for inflation alone, the rate would be over $46 an hour in 2021 dollars. For employees with young children themselves, working for $30 or even $35 an hour means losing money when factoring in the cost of childcare required while they work. Employees are also parents and will never be able to staff the desired expansion of summer programming from servicing 9,000 to 16,000 students if we continue offering an economically damaging proposition. Keep in mind that this is on top of working in the summer heat inside of the most decrepit facilities in the state. Keep in mind that the work required to deliver instruction, grade, provide feedback, and contact home goes well beyond the 6.5 hours billed each day if you want to truly move kids. If we're serious about re-engaging students and supporting their urgent needs after a crazy year, then we need professionals who are certified, experienced in building relationships with and educating students in Baltimore City who've already demonstrated a major commitment to the system. The alternative is to turn to contractors who are often more expensive and less effective than the paras, psychologists, counselors, teachers, and others who make our school work. It does not take a grand imagination to see that treating the talent in your system with respect and dignity by paying them a fair wage will translate into increased summer school engagement, increased student achievement, and increased staff retention. We urge the board to utilize their $690 million windfall to alter the insulting summer school compensation practices of the past in order to meet their own stated goals for city school students in the future. Thank you.
I thank Mr. Gaber. Our next person who is speaking will be Ms. Rachel Duncan, who's representing the Parent Community Advisory Board.
Good evening, thank you. Good evening, members of the Baltimore City School Board. As she said, my name is Rachel Duncan, and I serve as Secretary of the Parent and Community Advisory Board. As the Baltimore City Schools proposed budget comes before the board for vote on Thursday after last week's budget forum, we know these are difficult and uncertain times, and we appreciate the board members' thoughtful questions regarding how the district intends to plan for fiscal year 22 and beyond, including its plans for the infusion of one-time federal relief dollars. We were heartened to learn about the district's plans to upgrade Wi-Fi in city schools. We've heard at town halls from students, teachers, and families that the signal simply isn't strong enough in all areas of buildings, and that the bandwidth is insufficient to allow for the myriad activities needed to ensure student growth. We also welcome the focus on student mental health, wellness, and recovery, including items like this evening's contract with the Mayor's Office of Employment Development for the Youth Opportunity Academy for overage undercredit students. We do also have some questions and concerns about the fiscal year 22 budget. On page 15, it's noted that Governor Hogan's budget for fiscal year 22 also includes funds that maintain allocations at prior year levels. For city schools, this additional hold harmless amount is approximately $2.8 million. Despite this provision, we've heard about cuts to arts programming in several schools, including the surplusing of the strings teacher behind the beloved Stellar Strings program at Thomas Jefferson Elementary Middle, due to projected enrollment loss, and also surplusing of additional arts instructors at Dunbar. The list of schools in the fiscal year 22 budget shows 65 schools with projected enrollment declines, some of those quite substantial, leaving principals with no choice but to cut arts programming that is not only essential to a well-rounded education and to student mental health and well-being, but is actually required by the law under the Code of Maryland Regulations. We're hearing of these school-based cuts in the wake of projected enrollment declines, not only in the context of a state budget that includes a hold harmless amount for city schools, and also with hundreds of millions of additional federal grant funding coming into the state and the district in the near future, but also after noticing that it appears some parts of the budget may be more fungible than others. For example, in the past 3 fiscal years, the actual amount spent for school police was on average nearly twice the $6.8 million budgeted annually. Not including associated contracts like the one tonight with the University of Virginia for Coping Power in the City to study the effects of training to promote positive student-police relations. We request that the board and district help parents and students understand how the hold harmless provisions are being passed down to the individual school level, including any opportunities for revision to preserve these vital provisions before the budget is finalized. In prior discussions with staff, we recommended that revisions to policy KCA on family and community engagement encompass capacity building for school family councils on district-wide and school-based budgeting, including budget development, locked and unlocked positions, Title I, implementation of district initiatives, contracting, and the school performance plan. We agree with some of the commissioners who have expressed that the budget needs more granularity to make year-over-year comparisons easier, and to understand the what and how behind these budget lines, from staffing to materials to oversight to administrative support. Without these details, the community only observes sudden cuts to beloved programming without having gained the knowledge of budgeting, and often lacking the opportunity to participate in weighing difficult decisions brought on by periods of austerity. As this board considers the Family and Community Engagement Policy KCA on May 25th, we ask that you reflect on the budget forum and include training and technical assistance on the budget for families and the community in the next fiscal year and beyond, along with any procedural changes that might enable the budget review and feedback process to start earlier in the year. Thank you very much for the opportunity to provide comments. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Duncan. Thank you. And our last of our recognized groups, we have Ms. Alana Hines, who's representing the Associated Student Congress for Baltimore City. Is Ms. Hines?
Miss Hines, if you're on your phone, you can hit *6 if you're on your phone. I don't see her. Commissioner Sykes, if you could maybe shoot her a text and then we can come back. Does that work?
Yeah, I can send her a text now.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So I will turn it over to you, Mr. Gann, and then if we get her, we'll come back.
Okay, our first public comment is a video from Miss Melissa McDonald.
To the members of the Baltimore City Board of School Commissioners, my name is Melissa McDonald and I serve as a member at large for the Baltimore Teachers Union. On December 8, 2020, I submitted a video for public comment for the Baltimore City Board of School Commissioners meeting. Along with the video, I submitted a certification petition, including the signatures of 343 educators demanding the Office of Human Capital be held accountable for ensuring all BTU member certification questions and requests be answered within 10 days. This petition was submitted following years of certification issues and unanswered certification questions. I was assured by Linda Chinia, the chair of the Board of School Commissioners, that the CEO and her appropriate staff will review and respond to the concerns in a timely manner, and that the school board will monitor the resolution of the issues. Our BTU president, President Brown, was contacted on January 1st, 2021 by Jeremy Grant Skinner, the Chief Human Capital Officer, who agreed to the request to set a standard of response time of 10 days or less for all certification-related inquiries. We, at the Baltimore Teachers Union, have been instructing our members to direct all questions to the Human Capital email and also to copy our certification task force. I have been tracking these requests and have actively observed the negligent trends of the Office of Human Capital. I have observed members receiving generic emails in response to specific individualized questions. I have observed members' emails with time-specific questions remaining unanswered. I have personally escalated our members' questions to the Director of Human Capital, the Director of Labor Relations and Negotiations, and the Director of Employee Engagement, yet I have observed these questions remain unanswered after 10 additional days. I have observed the certification questions of our very own BTU president go unanswered after 10 days. President Brown received a verbal response from Jerome Jones, but is still awaiting a written response to her questions sent on March 9th, 2021, and her certification expires on June 30th. Despite the assurances of Chair Chinia and the commitments of Jeremy Grant Skinner, our BTU members are still not receiving the certification support and guidance they deserve. Nothing has changed. I'm bringing the certification issue again to the attention of the Baltimore City Board of School Commissioners because this concern not only hinders educators from renewing their certification, but it also prevents conditionally certified educators from getting fully certified, and it further steers educators away from our district. Again, I'm requesting the board's support in holding the Office of Human Capital accountable for fulfilling member certifications needs.
Okay, Commissioner Sykes, anything from Alana Hines yet?
No, not yet.
Okay. All right. Next, we have Miss Jocelyn Providence providing a live comment. And if you're on your phone, you can hit *6.
Hi, this is Jocelyn Providence. Can you hear me?
Yes, you have 3 minutes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Hello, my name is Jocelyn Providence. I'm a school teacher in Baltimore City Public Schools, high school math teacher. And I have some comments related to the FY 2022, 22 budget. Ooh, it's been a long day, everyone. Today I'm pretty sure the school board will be voting on the fiscal year 22 budget. And so big main summary of what I want to say is that no budget should be approved without an actual dollar amount set aside for an increase of full-time social workers, counselors, and psychologists district-wide. No budget should be approved without a reallocation of funds so that SEL is funded more than school police. And no budget should be approved that does not give a detailed breakdown of where this mere $220,000 is going to be used for the district equity office. And no budget should be approved without a more detailed plan on how to improve student choice and transfer process. And so I've been looking at the documents that were posted for today's board meeting. And have some points that I plan to email to the board because I know I can't fit it all into these 3 minutes. But because of some of these points, I really don't think that a lot of the concerns of community members have been properly addressed. And the school board should either postpone the vote on the fiscal year 22 budget, or they should be voting no to the budget in its current form. So first, based on the responses to board questions. So if you pull up that document, question number 2, it was stated that there will be an increase of 4.1% for the fiscal year 22 budget, quote, plus that will be added, whatever will be added via the ARP and ESSER 3. There's still no clarity about the number and the amount of money that will go directly to full-time additional certified mental health providers. We already know that there are buildings that do not have enough full-time providers, and we need to know how much of that money is going to go directly to full-time staff to be assisted there. And this is also not addressed by the charts that were given for question number 1 and question number 6. Also, in regards to question number 3, there was an addressing of staff-related wholeness and wellness. The main response was basically, we already give you great benefits and that should be utilized, which I think is simply unacceptable, which is based on what we've seen from this past school year, that is not enough. Question number 4, I don't think was properly addressed also because yes, it's great to avoid the discontinuation of these art programs, but there is still no allocation of funds.
Sorry, please wrap up your thought. Your 3 minutes are up.
Okay, yep. There's still no allocation of funds for prioritizing arts education in fiscal year 22-24. And my last main point that I'll say here is from the 4/27/21 budget document. And on page 82, it shows that school police budget is supposed to increase from fiscal year 21 to 22 without any explanation of why this is increasing. I know this was something brought up to Commissioner Griffin of there should be a breakdown of that, and that does not occur at all. And this budget can be a resource for more proactive solutions, positions, and provide mental health, student wholeness support and staff. And I will make sure to email my comments and questions to school board commissioners. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And Ms. Brown, just so you are aware, I don't know if you were aware, the vote has been moved to Thursday. So I think you mentioned it might be.
Okay, thank you for letting me know about that.
Yeah, so please send in your comments as soon as possible so the board has time to deliberate.
Great, thank you.
And Commissioner Sykes, I guess before we move on, anything yet?
No, still haven't got a response yet.
Okay, all right. Madam Chair, that was the only public comment. Back to you.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to go back just one more time. I want to thank the folks who brought us comments. And board members, are there any additional items that anyone would like to have pulled from the consent agenda as a result of public comment? If not, then is there a motion to approve item 8.01?
So moved. Read.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second, McFadden.
Thank you. And those in favor, Commissioner Bondima,
Yes.
Commissioner Griffin,
Yes.
McFadden,
Yes.
Commissioner Reed,
Yes.
Commissioner Richardson,
Yes.
Commissioner Roberts,
Yes.
Commissioner Sykes,
Yes.
and I'm in favor, so there's no one opposed. So this motion passes. We have 8 in favor and 2 absent. I'm going to turn it over to the Office of New Initiatives again for their presentation on item 8.02, which is a contract amendment for Coppin Academy.
Good evening again. I'm Angela Alvarez. I'm the Executive Director of the Office of New Initiatives.
Good evening. I'm Trevor Roberts. I'm a specialist in the Office of New Initiatives.
And so tonight, we are bringing forward a request that the board approve an extension of a memorandum of agreement, the 2020 memorandum agreement relating to the management of the academic program for Coppin Academy, and ensuring that there's adherence to requirements related to the academic programming, evaluation of school leadership, and the contract, if approved, would last through June 30th, 2023. This is for Coppin Academy, which is operated by Coppin State University. It's a high school that's located on its campus. It serves around 355 students. So Coppin State University has been the operator of the school since 2006. So we have a long-standing relationship with the university. The university has gone through several leadership changes in recent years. And just this past spring, appointed Dr. Jenkins as the president of the university. Last year, there was a prior president before that change from last spring who had expressed interest in winding down the contract. And that's how we got into the 2020 MOA in the first place. And the board approved that MOA agreement, which modified the charter agreement and transfer certain responsibilities to the district for this current school year. The agreement allowed the school to continue to be operated on the university's campus for this year. And as the district, for responsibilities that we took over, we deducted those from the funds that the operator would have received to compensate for taking up that part of the work. With this new leadership, the new president has expressed an interest in not winding down the agreement, but in deepening the relationship. This is really good news for us. I think the change, we met with a lot of parents and with school staff when the possibility of the contract ending was expressed. And so this renewed commitment to the high school program is exciting. And so, one of the things they want while we're bringing a request around just extending that MOA is time to really do a feasibility study to understand what they need to put in place in order to really be a strong operator of the school and making sure that the staffing is right and the right expectations. Part of what they're considering is, could they even deepen how they offer dual enrollment to even maybe move forward being like an early college, but need the time to really do that study. And so our hopes is that at the conclusion of the study, they would then enter into a renewal process and around, continuing to be an operator. This is, our relationship with the university is very unique. And so the extension kind of recognizes the unique benefits that our relationship with Coppin affords our students and our school community. not only is there a benefit from just receiving programming on on a college campus, which I think is a different feel for students, but students have access to university resources, um, and it, further enhances their educational experience, which I think is a particularly important. Um, and also, continuing in with this agreement provides some stability to the school community while we're in this kind of recovery around the pandemic. And so, just extending that relationship, we think is in the best interest of students. Part of what would be new in this agreement is we would paying 85 or this out of the school budget, the Coppin would begin to deduct an $85,000 fee for the use of the facility. Um, uh, but would not deduct. I think one of the things that's been unique is that, unlike most operators, they have not deducted any of the cost of operations from the school budget, which is like a typical thing, but they have not done that. The school has been able to operate without having to pay for many of the kind of normal operational things that one would expect. So that's sort of a different thing. They have not and this 85,000 fee is, I think we think a modest fee that to be deducted, reasonable for them to deduct from the school's budget for the facility. I'm gonna have Trevor share some of the additional context. Sorry, can you go back one slide?
So, as Angela mentioned, we do have a pretty unique relationship uh, between Coppin State University with their operation of Coppin Academy. Coppin Academy is one of only two charters in the entire state that's located on a university campus, um, and obviously the only one in Baltimore City. So that gives students a really unique opportunity to access dual enrollment opportunities and to benefit from being part of a university environment. And I think that's one of the things um, that we want to see a deepened relationship with the university for, as Angela mentioned, the possibility of expanding those dual enrollment um, programs and perhaps even moving into an early college program. Um, and as Angela mentioned, uh, Coppin State University has been operating Coppin Academy since 2006. And, in their partnership with the school and with the district, they have largely not charged this school or the district for the use of things like the facility in the past. Um, so that has shown a lot of good faith between the university and the district in that they've been, really allowing the school to operate um, with without taking out extra funding for some of the services that the university is providing as an operator.
Yeah, and those are like normal things that we see. I think the other thing we just want to caveat we're still in some talks with some smaller points with the university, and so we're asking the board to approve these kind of major things that allow us to enter an agreement around these major components of it. So we recommend that the board approve the extension of the 2020 memorandum of agreement. That's, again, it's related to the management of the academic programming. It ensures adherence to requirements related to the academic program, how we handle the evaluation of school leadership. It lasts again through June 30, 2023, at which point we will enter a renewal process with the university. Um, and so we would like the board to approve that, on the conditions that we can come to agreement on some of the smaller things that we're still discussing.
Okay, thank you.
Now, I think we need you guys to. I think you guys are going to vote on this right now, just to be clear.
Right. So, is there a motion to approve
Madam
this
Chair,
item?
before we do that, may I ask a question?
Yeah, I was gonna get the motion on and then open it up if there were, but
Yes,
go ahead.
ma'am. No, I'll wait for you.
Go ahead. I'll wait. Go ahead.
I appreciate it. I just want to know a little bit about there's some debt associated with this process. Angela, can you talk about that and what we would potentially be incurring as a result of the approval of this particular contract?
I know that I wouldn't describe it as that. So the costs that are associated with some of the components that we as a district group, so we're anything that we're taking on as a responsibility for the district, we would charge the school for, as well as the facility costs. All of those fit within the school budget. So while still allowing the school to maintain its programming. And again, I think it's similar to, again, the typical operational costs that we see other, other schools have to pay um, for things. So I wouldn't describe it as a debt. There's no debt that you would be entering into with this agreement. So again, it's 85,000 for the facility, and again, that would come out of the school's budget. So the school itself is paying for it. So it comes out of the budget of the operator. And Trevor, what's the total on the services?
The fee that the district would be paying for next school year is about $181,000.
Yeah, and to be clear, the district won't be paying for that. It'll come out of the school's budget.
Thank you for that clarity. That's exactly what I needed. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Okay. So is there a motion to approve this item, the contract amendment with Coppin Academy?
So move, Bandima.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second, Richardson.
Okay. And those in favor, Commissioner Bandima?
Yes.
Commissioner Griffin?
Yes.
Commissioner McFadden?
Yes.
Commissioner Reed?
Can I recuse myself, please?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Commissioner Richardson?
Yes.
Commissioner Roberts? Okay. I'm in favor. Any opposed? Or abstaining?
Commissioner Reed,
Roberts,
for the record.
did you vote?
I voted yes.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Thank you. Okay. So this motion
And Commissioner Reed is abstaining, right? Did the records capture that?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
This motion passes. We have 6 in favor and 1 abstaining. So yes, 2 absent. Okay, thank you. And the next item that was pulled was item 19.1, which was Youth Opportunity Academy. And the question was around the job placement participation.
Thank you.
Okay. Not certain who's going to answer this one.
I guess my question derived from 75% of the students elect to do the program. 100% of the people in the program go through the training process, but only 46% decide they want to participate in a job placement. And I thought the whole thesis of the program was to try to get jobs. That's what threw me off. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair, and our CEO and board members. This is Roger Shaw. Can you all hear me? I'm on my phone.
Yes, sir.
Yes, we can, Mr. Shaw. Go right ahead.
Yes. So I think I heard the question. Partly that 46% for this year was due to COVID and the pandemic, so it was challenging. What I would say, the students go through a job readiness piece, like you said, to prepare them. They work with our navigators to go through interviews and resume writing. So we do that job preparedness place, and some of them actually go through job shadowing and internship. So what we try to do in response to the pandemic this year is to kind of try to have some virtual kind of job placements for students. But it was just a struggle this year with partners and students being a little bit hesitant. And so we're working to kind of work through that challenge as we move forward. And as we get back into in-person, I'm expecting that to really increase.
Thank you.
So what do they do if they don't get a job? Do
So
they?
it's going, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just wonder. I don't want to see any slippage for that 54% that didn't go through that didn't get the placement. Are they unemployed? Do they go back to school? What's the end game?
They're still in school, right? We still uh, work with them to get jobs that lead to a career. So we still work with them. They work with our navigators. If they don't get placed, they work with the career navigators to help them through some challenges. Sometimes it's life circumstances that we have to deal with, but we do not let them just not participate in something. So it may be a conversation about what were some of the barriers, what are you dealing with outside of school that we have to work through.
All right, Commissioner Reed, is that?
No, I'm not all right, but I guess it is what it is. I mean, I just worry about those ones that continue to be on the treadmill and don't get a job.
Yeah, and Commissioner Reeves, I understand that, but I assure you that we continue to work with them. And in some cases, those students we have at Youth Opportunity, our career Wednesdays, where we take them through the process of job placement again and working through partners. So we do not let them slip. We do not let them not participate. It may not happen on their first program, but this is something we continue to do throughout the year. And so that sometimes carry over into the summer. And so we constantly work with those students if they don't have a job.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Okay. So is there a motion to approve this item 19.01, which is the Youth Opportunity Academy?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Second read.
Thank you.
Read second.
And those in favor, Commissioner Bondima?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Commissioner Griffin?
Yes.
Commissioner McFadden?
Yes.
Commissioner Reed?
Yes.
Commissioner Richardson?
Yes.
Commissioner Roberts?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm in favor. So we have no one opposing or abstaining. So this item is also, this motion is approved. We have 7 in favor and 2 absent. Thank you. And now, is there a motion to approve the remaining consent agenda?
So moved. Read.
Reed. Second, is that Roberts I heard?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Is there anyone who is opposed to the remaining consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, then we will say that this motion passes with no opposition. And that would be 7 in favor. Thank you. And we were to go back at this point, we have 2 information and discussion items. Thank you all. First is I'm going to turn it over to the Office of Human Capital for the first reader presentation of policy. I'll make sure I can see tonight. GLCE, which is telecommuting.
Good evening. I'm Jeremy Grandscanner from the Human Capital Office presenting a proposed revision to policy GCLE. This policy is about 18 months old. The board adopted this policy first in late 2019. Before that, we did not have a telecommuting policy or any official way for employees to work from any site other than their normal work location. And we, since that time, of course, have been in a very unique environment where we shifted very quickly to all staff and then many staff working from home on a regular basis, given the impact of building closures due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Knowing that that would probably change the way we thought about this, like most organizations. Ahead of time, we asked for this to be placed back on the board's agenda this year in order to consider some revisions. Looking back, our existing policy for telecommuting is admittedly conservative, going from a place where we did not have a process to allow for any telecommuting. We sought and received board approval for a policy that allowed for telecommuting for up to 1 day per week for certain employees back in 2019. As an example of employees who were not covered by the policy, anyone who was an hourly employee was not authorized to telecommute under that policy. And another aspect of our policy being relatively conservative compared to many organizations is the inclusion of very day-specific forms required to be completed by anyone who was telecommuting. We've learned through the last year plus that it is certainly possible for many employees to fulfill their duties and achieve significant impact while working from home. And again, in many cases, they've continued to do that for more than 1 day per week. We also know that during this experience, when the CEO notified the board of that this was one policy that was not possible to implement to the letter during the pandemic, that employees' experiences with working from home also do not exactly always align with the forward-thinking expectations that we have for telecommuting. An example of that shows up on the slide is, due to the very unique nature of the pandemic, there are times where we needed to allow staff members to work from home while caring for a child, which our existing telecommuting policy would not allow. And even with our revision or proposed revision, we would not allow something like that. So we also want to use this as an opportunity, given that the policy was very new already and therefore only implemented on a very limited basis, to outline clearly and better share with employees what official telecommuting means and entails. The next couple of slides show some information from our annual staff survey. Last summer, we shared with the Operations Committee the results of our first staff survey of this kind that was for all employees, and we intend to do that later this year as well once we complete analysis of a survey that
just recently ended. This is an early look at a related question that showed up in this year's survey in the context of COVID-19 and the experiences of the last year. We asked staff members how much they agreed with the statement that they had a supervisor who supports them and is committed to working with them with respect to flexibility of working conditions. And the blue and orange represent strongly agree and agree. More than 75% of employees said that they do have a supervisor who is supporting them with respect to that kind of flexibility, and the largest percentage of people responded saying they strongly agreed. That same survey on the next slide asked some open-ended questions about people's experiences in the last year. This shows two of the questions that we asked, specifically about what supervisors could do to help their staff members first, be more successful in their role, and second, better take care of themselves and support their own health and well-being. And in response to this open-ended question, where we wouldn't expect there to be huge percentages of people all saying the same thing, about 5% of all of the responses across 9,000 employees expressed specific interest in continued opportunities to telecommute in the future. This slide at a high level shows several of the things that we are proposing through changes to the policy itself. We want to expand eligibility so it is open to as an option for more employees. We want to increase the number of days that employees may be approved for telecommuting. We want to update the expectations to reflect, rather than day-by-day specific expectations for telecommuting, to reflect goals-based management. We have a lot of staff who, even when they are in their normal work setting, are not being managed by their supervisor with, here's your list of 8 things, and I'm going to watch you check off each of the 8 things, but rather, here are the goals of your role, and those are the things that I'm going to monitor. And we want our telecommuting policy and practice to reflect that option as well. We also here are adding a reference to related to chief officer's ability to provide for other kinds of flexibility, like schedule flexibility. We want to strengthen language in the policy to ensure that it is understood by our employees that when they are approved for telecommuting, that they need to, or in order to be approved for telecommuting, they need to be able to do exactly the same work from another location that they would normally do in their normal work setting. And we also are proposing now to expand some of the responsibilities of the Human Capital Office with respect to the administration of this policy. The next 2 slides show both items that were presented to the policy committee and then some other items that show up in the first reader proposal based on input during and since the policy committee presentation. The new language in the policy says that employees can be approved by their supervisor to work up to 3 days per week from an alternate work location. It includes both exempt or salaried and non-exempt or hourly employees as eligible categories. It continues to outline expectations for the workspace in an alternate work location to ensure that employees who are telecommuting have an appropriate space available to them to conduct their work. I got ahead and mentioned this a bit on the last slide. It includes an update to the type of work plan that we expect to allow for goals-based expectations. It refers again to other supervisor approved flexible scheduling. So a chief officer, a chief of a division already has the authority to tell someone that they could work a different schedule than what some other staff may be working day to day. And the policy already required the Human Capital Office in our first policy committee proposal to complete an annual review of trends of telecommuting. New items that since the policy committee are shown on this slide. So the first is that the proposed language now also offers the option with authorization from the CEO or her designee to approve full-time telecommuting for a limited number of staff. We recognize there is importance as a school district, and as we think about our own organizational development and culture, to maintain a place-based work environment for most staff, and to have most staff at least sometimes being in person and also heard, including at the policy committee, an interest in ensuring that for reasons like recruitment and retention, we could have at least some ability for some staff members in certain positions to work full-time from an alternate work location. The second change since policy committee is to include a requirement for the Human Capital Office to approve telecommuting agreements in each case. And the reason for this expansion and that responsibility is as we have evolved the proposal, it feels like it will be necessary to have some more central approval to ensure that we are implementing the telecommuting policy in an equitable way. So this is an update from the policy committee proposal and the current policy, which only requires a supervisor's approval. And then also, based on feedback or a request at the policy committee, we added language to the policy to look ahead to a future situation that could arise, like what we experienced last year, to provide for a mechanism to address a situation like the pandemic. So the way we've proposed to do that is to authorize the CEO to give public notice to the board to waive or alter provisions of the policy if there is a local, state, or federal emergency. The last slide just refers to existing documents that support our current telecommuting policy, and in the policy and regulation, the Human Capital Office is given and maintains responsibility for updating these documents on an annual basis. We have some more stakeholder input to do. I mentioned that we, through a survey of 9,000 of our employees, which is more than 90% of our employees, we heard about, through that survey, although we weren't asking them specifically about a telecommuting policy at the time, we got some insight into our employees' thoughts about this. We have a meeting this week with the Charter and Operator-Led Schools Advisory Board, and this month we will be seeking additional input from collective bargaining units and PCAB. With that, I can answer any questions board members may have.
Are there any questions, comments? Commissioner Richardson? That you? Or Commissioner Griffin?
Yes. Thank you for the presentation. You answered a few of my questions in it because you gave voice to some things I had questions about as far as the considerations for the criteria to telework. I am curious around the 3-day maximum. If you could talk a little bit more about the rationale for that and where that came from. And then I have another question about Section E as far as the child care clause.
Sure. We are proposing to have a 3-day maximum because we believe it is important for staff members to be available in person in the context of the work of a school district, where there are many employees whose job every day is to be in person with students in schools. And the policy existing, and we haven't suggested a change here, the existing policy says that school-based staff on days when school is in session are not eligible for telecommuting. So even in roles where as experienced in the last year plus, it is possible for people to replicate the work they can do in person in other roles. We want to make sure that we are across roles in the district, employees are visible to other employees and the people who we serve. There are also considerations of just like what infrastructure is in place. We haven't been an organization that has had years and years and years of people working virtually and having the infrastructure to stay connected, to make sure we're attending to our organizational culture. And this was a discussion a bit in the policy committee, where it is the perspective showing up in this policy proposal at this time is that it is important for us to have a default space that is in person, even as we expand the options for people to mix their time in the office with time at home.
Okay. Thank you for that. I just, the childcare sentence, the way it's worded, because I get what it's trying to say, and it's like, don't use teleworking just to substitute for childcare, but I'm a little concerned about the wording of that, who it's helping and who it's targeting, also how it's enforceable. So I just wanted to throw that out there as a consideration, something to think about. And I'm curious to see what stakeholders will say if that clause gives them any pause as well. So I just wanted to flag that. I have just a little concern. I don't know why when I read it, it kind of rubbed me a little wrong. So thinking about how to word that to say what we actually mean, and not in a way that may target specific employees, or who have flexible schedules because they may have had a newborn, or they may have a young child and they have to switch off with their spouse, and it does benefit them and they can still get their work done. Like, how are we ensuring that we're supporting our workers and getting their job done while managing their lives? Because what we've seen in COVID is that, little people may be there and that is a part of life. We cannot ignore that. But we're also not saying to abuse the flex time or the telework time. So how do we say that in a policy that communicates that in a way that it doesn't feel targeting? Yeah.
Thanks, Commissioner. We'll think about the language there. I will say very briefly that the intent there is not to limit the flexibility that a supervisor could give to an employee to say, I have a newborn, and the newborn, there's a certain hour of the day where I'm going to, flex my time, as much as to say, if you're working a 7-hour day, an 8-hour day, whatever that is in your schedule, that you can't be the sole provider during that work time for a child. And we can think about how to word that and also see what other stakeholders give in terms of input.
Yeah, I would be careful there because I think about single moms, you know, they may be the sole provider and they may not be able to get around that. And so just thinking about how we word things and how we take folks into consideration. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you. Any other? Okay. This was a first reader, so thank you, Ms. Branskin. And then there's still time for more input. It will still be reviewed through policy committee, and as you saw with the public comment, with the other comment, it's also going to PCAP. So there'll be additional time. Thank you. Our next really will be our final information item is a presentation on the budget again. So I'm going to turn it over, I believe, to our chief financial officer, or is it? Oh, thank you, our chief of staff. I'll get it right. It's been a long day.
It has been. Thank you, Madam Board Chair. I'm going to start, and then I am going to turn it over to the Chief Financial Officer in a minute, but I'm just going to give just a high-level overview first. So just kind of reminding folks that that this budget is coming at at a moment in time when we're just getting past a disruption in schooling for our students, and it's at a time when we're in an unusual moment where we're not just considering the FY22 budget, we're also looking at how we're going to be investing the resources that we're getting through the ESSER dollars. And so it's the first time in years where we've seen a significant influx of one-time resources that is long overdue for students and are much needed. And so we are thinking very carefully about how to invest these resources in our students in a way that is being true to kind of investments we've made in the past, and making sure we're thinking about the long-term well-being of our students as we're both thinking about the FY22 budget as well as these investments that are coming up. We do that, and again, in a high level overview I'm going to give today, and in the conversations that we're having that Chief High covered and Chief Jones have kicked off as the lead of the engagement around the 3R work. Those meetings we're again going to be talking about how we're investing those funds, and throughout this we're really holding close to our values. We're leveraging investments that we've made in the past, relying on what research tells us works, as well as what our own experience tells us works. And so that's why in the budget conversation, you're seeing, again, us hewing to our key values in the blueprint. So a focus on the blueprint investments of literacy, wholeness, and leadership. You continue to see focus on equity, and then we continue to ensure, be responsive to the interest in the community in providing a healthy and safe learning environments for our students, and making sure that the students have access to technology to access their learning. So tonight's piece of the budget is really just one piece of this larger conversation about how to meet our students' needs in this moment. And I really encourage the community to also to engage in the longer term work that we're doing on developing our plan to reconnect, restore, and reimagine the educational experience for our students. So tonight, again, we'll go over a high-level overview of the main themes of the budget. The board, as the Madam Board Chair said at the beginning, will actually vote on the FY22 budget on Thursday during the board's special meeting to allow a little bit more time for the board to review materials and responses to questions. This year's process has been condensed, and so I think we've reflected too that it's a little too condensed, and so we need to figure out how to build more time in between when it's presented and then when it's voted on, and when the board forum is, so that there's time to build into that calendar time for questions and response to questions, and kind of a back and forth for time for thoughtful reflection and answers during that time. One key way, again, that's important for the community to do that now is by engaging around the funding priorities in the immediate term as we engage around the plan for the reconnect, restore, and reimagine. So for when we're talking about today's budget, we're considering the engagement that we've done with families that started back months ago, and we really, for the FY22 budget development, engage families around, and families, community partners, students in engagement sessions that occurred, online survey tools, and individual school level meetings to get their input and identity and get them to identify their key priorities. Next slide. So these are the key priorities that came out of those conversations. And you'll see tonight that we're going to really kind of use them to form a thread through the highlights that we're going to look at for this budget, as they do form a continuous thread throughout the FY22 budget process. And then they'll remain a priority as we move forward to the development of the 3R plan for the ESSER spending. We'll keep seeing these highlights come out again. So I think we're going to jump to the next place. You kind of see these priorities. So again, we've stuck to the key priorities of literacy, wholeness, and leadership. And within wholeness, one of those key priorities we saw was about student wellness, about student social and emotional health, and wholeness. And so you see our continued investment of the wholeness specialists in schools, and those teams creating weekly activities for students by grade level and providing professional learning for teachers in the use of those activities. Also, more investment in mental health services. So, making sure that we're continuing the investment we made last year in the school-based social workers, also psychologists and counselors, and plus 6 community-based partnerships that provide mental health clinicians, who are currently working in 131 different schools through the expanded school-based behavioral health program. This focus on wellness, on student wellness, and on wholeness and mental health services is something that we're going to see as we move into the 3R work. So on ESSER, again, just want to keep reiterating the context that we have the FY22 budget that we're considering and the board will vote on Thursday. And at the same time, there are these other investments that we're making and engaging the community around. So the first bucket of resources was ESSER 1, and that came in those early investments. We really made sure we were investing in food services support to make sure that we could continue to feed communities. So these funds came back last summer when we were still making sure that we were providing meals to the community. And so huge kudos to the food and nutrition team and all our cafeteria staff who were in person, making sure that meals were served to the community when school was not in session. We also invested in that time to make sure that students had access to devices and hotspots to access their virtual learning. And then we also, as we were developing our health and safety measures, we also made sure that we had signage in place so that when students returned to school, they could see where to safely stand, and temps to support in-person learning. ESSER 2, these funds we're investing now, and again, similar to some of the key investments that we heard from the community. There's health and safety measures here, like the $34 million for COVID testing. That's part of this investment, and that has been a very successful program. We're doing the weekly now asymptomatic testing in high schools and elementary schools that is documenting that our schools are very safe places. We've tested about 60,000 individuals in the elementary grades and have a positivity rate of about 0.5%. I think it's a little bit lower than that now. And in high schools too, very low positivity rates in our high schools as well, testing about 10,000 individuals there. We're also doing contact tracing to make sure that we are following up on any cases of COVID in our schools. We've also made sure that we put supports in for special ed to make sure that we're supporting students who are in special ed. And then we also are looking at key investments in things like grant administration, because as all these dollars flow through, we also need to make sure that we're investing effectively these resources and spending them and meeting reporting requirements. And then again, other themes from the community, things like the indoor air quality was a major investment in this grant to make sure that that students are in safe and healthy learning environments. So for ESSER 3, this is the work that's just been begun as underway in terms of the community engagement efforts that we have in place, that teams are facilitating sessions. There's one tonight. There's been some starting last week to really engage community input on how to spend these resources and thinking about what are the investments we want to make over the next few years, These funds are available through September 30th, 2024, so they're longer term investments. And part of that thinking is also making sure we're thinking about how it aligns with the Kerwin funding that's coming into play over the next few years. And so making sure that we're remembering this is one-time funds, and then also thinking strategically about which of these funds can be picked up by those Kerwin dollars as they come into place. And in this Reconnect, Restore, Reimagine work, you see the key priority areas, which again, a through line with some of those key focus areas we heard from the community of wholeness, virtual learning, school, and staff well-being has been is part of that work that we'll be engaging extensively with the community on in the next month. And so again, just highlighting some more of these community focused, community driven areas. So the air quality remains a main focus with, we're continuing to make sure that all schools have either the MERV 13 filters or the air purifiers. The COVID testing we talked about is well underway and continuing. And then also additional custodial staff to make sure that schools are cleaned and have the support to make sure that they're cleaned as students are in and out of spaces. And then again, some of the technology investments like the all online learning platforms, as well as the continuation of hotspots for students and making sure as the comments from public comments tonight about making sure our buildings have wireless access points so that they can serve students in person successfully, and that students have access to the devices they need to engage in learning. And I think, so then, yeah, so I'm about to turn it over to Chris. The other point I wanted to make before I turn it over to Chris was we talked a little bit about arts tonight, and that came up in the last session as well. And so the finance team did work since those comments about arts, the concerns were raised about arts, to make sure that we were fulfilling the commitments we've made about really prioritizing arts as a critical investment for schools. And so through that review, looked and identified 13 schools in which an arts education position was slated for discontinuation in FY22. And so we've identified, we've made sure that those positions will continue. So the vast majority of those schools qualify for concentrations of poverty funds, which under the legislation this year under Kerwin, one of the changes that occurred was the per pupil dollars for concentrations of poverty are beginning to flow this year. And so for the majority of those schools, all or a large portion of those positions can be funded through those resources, which we don't know the amount yet. We've not received that information from MSDE, but we know those dollars are coming, and so we'll use them to help make sure we provide a continued investment in arts, as it's a critical piece of making sure that students come back to school and have a positive experience when they return to schools. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris, who's going to go through some of the numbers.
Thank you, Chief Perkins-Cohen. My name is Chris Doherty, Chief Financial Officer. Happy to talk again about the proposed FY22 budget. And Chief Perkins-Cohen and previously other chiefs have talked about various aspects of what we will be doing in FY22, all the content, if you will. To take another look at the highest level amounts, you see in front of you the general funds, which is this, which is the bulk of it, is at $1.182 billion. That represents a small increase from last year. Special fund grants, which are both federal and state, come in at just under $156 million, and enterprise funds with which we serve our meals to our students, projected at $55.6 million, for a grand total of just under $1.4 billion, which on a year-to-year basis is up just a small bit, a percentage point from last year. If you go to the next slide, you'll see again what I think is the most important chunks of our general fund revenue. I think, as most people know, the vast majority, about 97%, comes from state revenue and city revenue. We supply the other bands for fullness and accuracy, but with 97% plus from state and the city, that's where all the action is and where most of the activities are. It was mentioned both by Chief Perkins Cohen and in some of the public comments correctly that we are having a hold harmless. We were provided with hold harmless provisions from the state. So our largest funder indicated that what with the vagaries of the COVID enrollment and everything is driven by student enrollment here, we were held harmless. What that means is that we are essentially flat in the all-important state revenue from year to year. But what it also doesn't mean, not to shy away from it, because some of the public comment did touch on this, is it means that as a system, we are generally held flat. But that certainly doesn't mean there isn't some legitimate lumpiness between schools. And where one school can gain a few dozen students, one school can lose a few dozen students. And in a system where by design the dollars follow the students, we understand that there are consequences at the school level when you have a student-based funding model, and some of that was brought up in the public comments. Although Chief Perkins Cohen mentioned it, I would like to stress again that the comments made previously, both at the 427 budget presentation and then at the board budget forum just a week ago tonight, 5-4, a lot of the public comment and a lot of the board comments frankly touched on just this, the consequences of school-based enrollment dips and what that means for programming. And although this might not always seem like a dialogue, it really is a dialogue. That's why we had so much outreach in January to get community input, which framed a great deal of the foundation of our FY22 budget. And we also got very clear feedback from multiple sources about what you might call the effect at the school level of some of this um, up and down revenue. So from the moment we started getting those bits of feedback, we looked school by school at the 13 schools that Chief Perkins Cohen mentioned, and we're very happy to say, and this was mentioned, we put it in the questions that are posted in board docs, and Jocelyn Providence mentioned it and referred to some of those questions. We're very happy to say that we've identified funding for those positions that our attention was brought to. So we think that's good. We can't always do that, of course, because you have to have suitable funding and it has to be allowable. But we're very happy with the feedback that we got and the actions that we've taken since then to try to make sure we get where we need to be. Also, although it wasn't mentioned, I don't think by Chief Perkins Cohen, but it's worth saying now, those restoring of the arts education positions that we've been working on pretty much nonstop since last Tuesday night. It also includes, we think, the continuation of specifically the strings project that either Rachel Duncan or Jocelyn Providence mentioned in their remarks earlier tonight, which just exemplifies the ongoing dialogue that this is, frankly. And we will continue to answer those questions and continue, we know, to get suggestions and feedback from not just the board directors, but the public. So this slide is the side-by-side, which, as I say, leaves aside the gigantic amount of money that we are getting one-time funds, and this is just to make year-on-year comparisons meaningful. It's just our general fund proposed next year to this year, which is up 0.8%, which is why we use this. Next slide. This is a breakdown of the biggest single chunk, the state portion, which is 857 million last year and this year, or rather the year we're in and the proposed next year. The formula is rather complex, quite meaningful, and it is laid out there by category. It is based on a foundational base pupil amount and then different amounts for different types of students and different programs. And I do think, although there's a lot of information on that slide, the key takeaway is the one we've made, which is thankfully we are flat from last year, or the current year to next year. And there was a time not long ago where we were quite concerned about whether COVID-related dips in enrollment, which we were speculating on and haven't really seen as much as we were prepared for, would lead to significant dips in funding. And we're very happy to say that's not the case on a general fund basis, in addition to the one-time funds that we've talked about and that we're reaching out to the community on how to spend. Please. Again, this is now another breakdown of the breakdown. When in a previous slide you saw that after our general funds, we have 156 million in special funds, and those special funds are both federal and state. This is a breakdown of the federal funds, which is what I think most people think of when they think of federal funds. They think of Title I, they think of IDEA, Title II, et cetera. And these are the ones that are above $1 million. And you can see that it's, again, essentially flat from FY21, which is the year we're in the 11th month of now, and in the FY22 proposed budget. So no big drops there, and these are the non-ESSER federal funds. Now, again, we go in and out appropriately of talking about ESSER, the federal funds, and general funds, and also Kerwin. A big development that has happened recently is the passage into law of the Kerwin legislation, which is significant funding over the next several years. And for a bit more on both how we're looking at the coming Kerwin funding as well as what we've experienced thus far in Bridge to Kerwin, I turn to my colleague Jessica Wilson, who's the Director of Strategic Resourcing.
Good evening, everyone. We've talked a little bit about different types of restricted funding, and Kerwin Bridge funding is another example of that restricted funding that we received. These are items that we weren't sure were going to be included in the budget in FY22, as Chris had mentioned earlier, but they are a continuation in FY22, and that's going to lead us into the overall implementation of Kerwin, which starts for us in FY23. I think the biggest thing to highlight here, that one of the additional adds on this was really that concentrations of poverty per pupil, which is going to be something that, as we receive more information from the state, we're going to be rolling out for schools and communities to be able to make some decisions about what those additional dollars might mean at the school level in that program. Next slide, please. Just an overall note about Kerwin, there's going to be a lot of work going on with the community about the 3R work. One of the biggest pieces of that puzzle is thinking about the sustainability of items that are identified in that work and what is appropriate for us to be planning for the sustainability long term as we start to implement the Kerwin legislation itself and the additional funding that is projected to come along with that. And thinking through those pieces of what are the items that are a point in time that we're putting on that one-time funding versus items that are long-term investments for our students and families that we're going to be building into the long-term sustainability plan for the district. And with that, I believe I am passing it off to Courtney to finish off some of the additional slides.
Good evening, everyone. So this slide shows a year-over-year comparison of the Title I allocation. So it shows the total allocation as well as the portion of the allocation that goes to schools. Of note here, in fiscal year 21 and 22, you'll see that the number of eligible schools increased because of a change in the methodology. So it's allowing more money to get to more schools over the last two cycles. Next slide, please. This slide has a year-over-year comparison of the enterprise fund. The fund that Chief Doherty mentioned earlier is for food services. And we also have our fund balance contribution for the last 3 years as well. So you see an increase from last year to this year from 15.3 million to 17.5 million for the fund balance contribution. Of note here, the FY21 enterprise dollar amount was developed prior to the pandemic. So that amount was an estimate, just like it is, for FY22 with our estimate of what we think it will be. It is a reimbursement, so it's based on the amount of meals served. And of course, in FY21, with a lot of closures that we had, the meals served were a lot lower than what we had anticipated when the budget was developed. So that being said, we anticipate lower revenue for FY21. For enterprise fund, we've made accommodations for that variance using funds we set aside in the side fund balance. and also covering salaries on the ESSA grants that we've received. Next slide. So this next section goes through some of the allocations. What we were talking about before was like some different revenue sources in the budget. So Chief Doherty mentioned before the general fund portion, and that $1.182 billion essentially is broken down into two main allocation pots. There's the $803 million that goes directly to schools and what we call the principal controlled budgets, the items that go to charter schools, lock positions, to the individual school budgets that schools have the collaboratives and communications with their community members on building those budgets. And then we have the centrally budgeted allocations. This portion is budgeted in the central office, but not just for the central office, also for and on behalf of schools. Next slide. So the direct school allocations, breaking down that 803 million a little further. As I mentioned, we have what we call the fair student funding, the traditional per pupil allocation that goes to schools that includes the base funding and the weights. We have block positions. These are positions that are assigned essentially to schools and funded through the lock allocation. We also have the charter portion, which is essentially the per pupils for charters by the amount of charter students. We have the special education unlock dollars that schools have control over. We have the alternative option programs. And then we have the target allocations for specific programs in schools. So that totals the 803 million. This slide shows a year-over-year comparison for the traditional per pupils and the charter schools. Not a comparison, but just a look from one year to the next. You can see that the traditional per pupil has been held relatively flat at 55.68 again this year. The goal was to sort of keep the spending power and buying power similar for schools since we had a relatively flat general fund budget for schools, so that was maintained. You can see the charter allocation, which is revenue formula driven, go from 9304 to 9234. Also, charter formula, traditional formula, those are usually recalculated in the fall once we go through the enrollment adjustment process. So based on what the actual enrollment is, not the projected enrollment, you may see those numbers change in the final. This slide gives a breakdown for the central office budget. So as I mentioned before, we have that 379 million that is budgeted centrally. So this is broken down by the different offices within each office, and we'll get to that in a little bit. We have portions of the budgets that are, administration or, done on behalf of schools, or truly central office and so forth. But this shows, some of the year to year, fiscal year 21, current year to fiscal year 22 allocations by office. Major items of note here, the change in allocation because of the move of the student wholeness department from the chief academic office to the chief of schools office. Another item which was noted here, if you see the IT office reduction, it's not an actual reduction in the services provided by IT. We've been able to identify funding, grant funding that can cover some of the items that were costed to that office. So it's a reduction on the general fund side, but it's still, matching expenditure on the grant funds. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, in the dollars that are spent, we have this 68% of the budget, which is what I was referring to earlier, the 803 million that is principal controlled. And of that other portion, the 379, we sort of went through and broke down and allocated how those things are spent and what they're spent on. So we have portions that are non-distributable fringe, debt service, our MSA contribution. We have that 15% in orange is the school supports budgeted centrally. So these are items that are in the central office budget, but budgeted on behalf of schools. And we have the 6% that's for remaining administration in central office. On the next slide, we have a breakdown of that 15%. So this breaks out some of the different categories in the 15% that's budgeted centrally on behalf of schools. So major items in here, you have transportation, you have out of county and non-pub, you have utilities, non-administration items in the chief operating officer office, so preventive maintenance contracts, trash removal, locksmiths, plumbers, etc. In the CAO contracts, you have a lot of special ed contracts, such as speech, nursing aides, etc. Athletics, ITD, OTPS items are things like WAN, LAN, internet. So it's the breakdown of some of the items that, like I said, are budgeted in central office, but on behalf of schools. Thank you.
Madam Chair, that concludes our formal presentation, but of course we're available if.
Right. Are there any questions, board members, questions or comments this evening? Commissioner McFadden?
Thank you. I appreciate you all being responsive to the feedback around the arts. And Chief, I apologize for not being able to get back to you in a reasonable amount of time. But I appreciate that work. I just want to say that this is um, an immediate, um, this is immediate attention given to this particular issue that was mentioned with the community and with several stakeholders. But we have to continue to strategize about more long-term sustainability as it relates to the arts. We heard a presentation on Tuesday, last Tuesday, in our teaching and learning committee meeting around whole child services and supports. And certainly, even though the arts aren't included in that, I definitely think that the arts tend to the whole child, right? So we have to just figure out ways that we continue to think long-term strategy about how do we sustain a lot of these arts positions and programs so that we are making sure that our young people have well-rounded experiences so that they're competitive, not just in academic, from an academic point of view, but a worldly point of view. But I just wanted to say thank you, and I appreciated the work that you all have put in and are continuing to put in. But I think it has to be more long-term strategy and ongoing discussion around just more sustainability um, around arts education and arts programming. So thank you. I want to make sure that that comes out first. Thank you comes out first.
Thanks. Commissioner Griffin?
I echo the thank you, especially I saw the changes to the presentation and the starting to get a bit more granular and understanding how the budget is broken down for different parts of where the money is going, right? So I really do appreciate that. And I know for me as a visual person, it gave me greater context to understand how to follow the money to the student. One question I had that is just coming up for me when we continue to talk about the student wholeness and student health and wellness and mental health is how many, the budget for FY22, the way it stands, will that allow every school in the district to have some type of health, wellness, or mental health support person in the building? Whether it be a social worker, whole school specialist, some kind of student wholeness coach, what have you. I'm curious about that. And then thinking about FY23, I know we're going to have those ESSER 3 funds coming in. I would like to see a commitment that part of those dollars will go to making sure that every school does, if that's not happening in FY22.
Yeah, if I could jump in on that one, Commissioner. One, I want to make sure that we're being transparent about the current commitment and then the future. So currently, we do have in every school, and this was approved action from I think 2 budgets ago now, where every school has at least like a full-time social worker, right? So that commitment is currently in place. I think moving forward, there's two pieces. One, the mapping work that you raised that we think kind of intersects with a lot of some of the mapping work we've been doing around community condition index that I think will give a richer view of what is in place by schools. So for example, then you'd be able to see where is there a wholeness specialist, right? So like we have a certain number of schools that have wholeness specialists. There are certain schools that have a wholeness specialist and a half-time school psychologist, right? So that's, I would say, like step two is how do we provide a richer view beyond just the minimal around what's happening in each school. And then I would say, at least initially, the third piece touches on the second part of your question, and that's the discussion around what do we, uh, where do we prioritize additional supports based on our equity principles, right? And is there now a new baseline for support across all schools? Because I would say those are two related questions, but not necessarily the same, right? And so part of that will also get into the sustainability question that's related to everything from mental health, wellness specialists to the arts long-term piece that Commissioner McFadden just talked about, and that's where we get into the grading of funds. And Perkins Cohen referenced that. So we know we have one-time dollars. And we also know we have Kerwin dollars because of advocacy that actually change the bottom line, right? Of we can now say with these funds, we want to commit to an additional level, right, of minimum for all schools or a permanent level for selected schools serving, frankly, more underserved populations. And so one of the ways that, we started looking at that and shall I say practicing or getting started with that was with the concentrations of poverty dollars, right? And so because that's kind of a down payment on Kerwin, we call it a down payment, it's the initial, right? That was part of how we resolved the arts challenge, right? Because when we looked at those schools, we said these are additional dollars. The minimum should be, right, as part of kind of looking at the whole work, right, the whole work of schools in supporting whole children, it made sense to use those extra dollars to support arts at those schools instead of making schools wait until the final figure was there and we had all the paperwork when they would have lost staff, right? So that was part of the resolution we did, was saying, let's be reasonable about this. Let's use the funding that we have in place for schools, right, that are found in this space. So not to go on, but I would just say I think there are those three things. What we can guarantee now, a deeper picture of what the distribution of mental health and I would say school culture supports, because like a lot of the pieces we're also looking at is kind of what are those roles and supports, like our wellness specialists, who a lot of principals are saying are like, yes, it's great to have a wellness room for kids to go to, right, but it's also great for our entire school. It helps our entire school community. They have staff going to the wholeness rooms, right? And so how do we build that? But then I think the real engagement piece, and it's part of the planning that we're doing around R3, is with these other dollars, where do we want to actually invest one time, but then also invest long term when we look at the additional Kerwin funding. Does that answer your question?
It does. So I'm glad to hear that our schools already, all schools already have a full time social worker.
Right.
Okay.
But there are schools who we know need more than that.
Yeah.
Right?
That was going to be my next piece in thinking about capacity of this one full time social worker. And some schools may have more than that. How are we ensuring that one, they have the support that they need, whether it's PD or from the homeless office at the district, and two, that there's some other layer of support for our social workers or our wholeness and mental health professionals in the schools. So that's the piece that I'm like kind of leaning toward being a bit more concerned about now, because in a normal year, like we can only imagine the caseload of a lot of our social workers or mental health supports and just student wholeness supports, the student support teams in general. in schools and thinking about more students coming back to school, more students bringing with them whatever they have experienced in this year and some out of schools or halfway in and halfway out, and then coming back to reinteract, the social dynamics of school, like all that fun stuff. It's gonna need more support. And so, like, you all keep hearing me harp on this because I just feel like we need to pay attention there to be a bit more proactive in our budget and providing that layer. And even if it's not included in this FY22 budget, understanding that there's going to be something that is set aside to understand where we're putting this from the extra allocated money that may come from ESSER 3 or the summer adjustment money, like whatever it is. I just would like for us to commit to something there because I could feel it coming.
Well, and I would just say to you, Commissioner Griffin, on that the focus groups we have had continually, principals, school leaders have been clear about this, right? The focus groups with teachers they've been clear. Teacher advisory group was saying this back in December when I was meeting with them. So I think that the piece is not the convincing, but I think the piece is how we're operationalizing that, not only with just dollars going to that. And I understand from this discussion, it is more than appropriate to ask for it for the dollars. But the other piece that I have been messaging continually is it is about also having a thoughtful strategy. And so some of what we have been doing is actually talking to school-based folks about that strategy because, and I'll give you a living example. When I talked to folks in Denver last year, they were like, well, yeah, you could add a bunch of positions if you want. But to your point, if there's not training, if folks aren't culturally responsive, it doesn't matter if you're just adding people. The question is, what is the strategy? And in some of our schools, part of the strategy has actually been partnering with community-based organizations that actually already have the capacity. And so then the question becomes, what's the long-term capacity within the school as opposed to what we're putting together for some triage? And we have teachers that are already telling us, we've got kids we haven't laid eyes on in a year who are coming back in just very different spaces. And so where is that coming? The mayor, to his credit, flagged the interagency collaboration around, we don't want to talk about it, but it's happening, increased identification of child abuse cases, right? And so what is the cross-city effort around that? So I only say that to say you are right to sound it, you're right to sound it from your position. And I also want to assure you that has been probably the clearest area of investment. And while, I respect testimonies, around, oh, are we focusing too much on testing and all that? We have been real clear from the beginning, based on the feedback from the ground, that this was already a need in Baltimore City. And that's why we made the commitment to social workers when we did. And it's going to continue to be there. So I do think that it's in the planning and the work, because the initial reaction is like, oh, we got to add all this stuff. And I feel like my role as a district leader is to say, what is the strategy? Because that's the danger with getting lots of money at one time. Everybody wants to throw it at 15 different things. And what we're doing with this community outreach and stakeholder feedback is saying it's not just about dumping money. It is about having a strategy and looking at what is actually going to have the immediate impact, and how can we come then back to the board and the community and say we have a long-term strategy. So that might be some of the pull, is because I just don't want people, and I've been saying that, and principals have been very thoughtful about it. But I don't want people just jumping and say, oh, let's now hire another 15 people, and that's somehow going to eradicate it, when we all know it's not. It's not, because I hear from young people, they know who the counselors are, who they want to go to, and they know who are the people. And thank Commissioner Sykes for nodding as I say that. Like they know who they go to in those trusted capacities. So it's got to be a both and it's got to be about how are we bringing those resources together in a way that we can then go back to the community and say we used your dollars well. We used the dollars in support of that.
it makes me think, and then I'll hush y'all. It makes me think about how, like, we have the dollars that are going directly into schools, and the providing of it, it was a point brought up earlier about policy KCA, but it also makes me think about the school's role in creating a budget with the community and pushing for that training and that understanding from family and community members on how to properly advocate and identify areas in a budget that can be redirected toward what they actually would like, i.e. programs that are already possibly partnering with other schools in the community, and or other opportunities for student wholeness or staff wholeness or what have you in that school building. And so it makes me think about that, and I agree with the strategy. I agree with being strategic. I just want to continue to kind of sound that alarm on this end, as well as what we're already hearing from the community and have been from the beginning, because it, like, we have to start to tug some of those dollars that we may spend in other areas. We may spend on disciplinary measures. We may spend on the police budget, and think about how that may stay flat and this may increase because of the extra money we're getting from Kerwin or ESSER or what have you. Like, thinking about how to even show that even more delineated in our budget as a priority, not just based on positions and people that we put in places, but strategically directing that money towards schools and communities so that they can then spend it the way they need to holistically for their students. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And being able to determine, I would say, also a return on investment, right? Mm-hmm. Because part of, even the question we talk about shifting dollars from one place to the other, school police have done far more investment in their ability to support youth development, to recognize trauma, to have culturally responsive practice than, quite frankly, in probably any other department, right, at city schools. So the question becomes also, how are we going to measure return on investment so that as we're making those shifts, we're using data, right, to actually drive what some of those shifts are in terms of effectiveness, and being able to communicate out kind of what the shifts are that we are making. And I think that's going to be important long term as well, because everybody, we want to be responsive, but we also want to have real, what I would call, transparent conversations about where the return on investment is coming, not just in terms of dollars, but in terms of impact and actual demonstrated practice.
Yeah. Can't wait to see that map. I know that's going to help us out.
Yep. Agreed.
Is there any other? Okay. I think the conversation that we've moved into and will continue is very much going to be a part of what happens for the next several weeks and actually years, as we look at these ESSER dollars and anticipate the Kerwin dollars. The one comment I would make, and I know we are saying it very forcefully, is please can we get a really strong graphic that helps people understand the differences in these pots of money, especially the general funds, the ESSER funds, and the Kerwin, because to your point you're making, when you lump it all together, it sounds very different than when you're looking at, what's the constant versus the one-time infusion versus the look toward what sustainability will be in the future. And I think we've got to get that better on the graphic. Thank you. All right. I don't see another hand. I was giving good wait time. I don't see another hand, so I'm going to move on. Thank you, everyone, for that, and a reminder to folks that, and to board members, that we will continue to be reading and checking the responses to questions, looking at feedback, and the board will be voting on this Thursday on the proposed budget. I just need to check to see at this time if Commissioner McFadden wants to do any. I'm gonna wait. Did you want to do any report out on the teaching and learning committee? Because I think you were the committee that met. since our last meeting?
I just want to remind folks that the meetings are recorded and they are on YouTube, on our YouTube page. And what I will do, though, we did have a wholeness update, and I'm going to put a link to well, we had whole child services and supports, an update on whole child services and support. And I just put a link to an article that featured city schools about some of the wholeness and whole child service work that is happening within the district, within the school system. Um, a lot happening with athletics, a lot happening with our homeless students, a lot happening with student wholeness. So I don't want to take anything away from the information that was presented. I just want everyone to kind of go back if you have an opportunity to, but certainly look at that particular article that I put in the link. A lot of great things are happening. And then also, finally, very briefly, we had an update on summer learning, where we heard the theme reconnect, restore, and reimagine. And I think, and that is the focus of the summer. That's the focus of how we're moving forward. And it has to be more than just the 3 R's. And I'm saying this to everyone. It has to be more than just something that we say. And it really has to become a part of who we are and what we do as we are bringing our young people back and reconnecting with our families. So we're going to have more than 20,000 students in summer programming this year. And certainly City Schools is not the only entity that provides summer options for children and families. So this is also a call to all of our community partners that may have programming happening, maybe in churches or in mosques or in recs or in other places, to just connect with us so that we can help share that information. Because as Commissioner Richardson will often say, all hands are on deck at this point for how we move forward with our young people and with our families. So really, that's it. We had a science update as well. So I'm just encouraging commissioners to just go back and kind of check if you have a moment. I know we're all busy, but those presentations will do more justice than me talking about them right now to you all, because we have some really great staff and adults and folks wrapping around all of this work. So just thank you to the staff that is continuously working for our young people, but we all have to make sure that we're wrapping our arms around our young people as we move forward throughout the summer and throughout the next several years. That's all I have.
Thank you. And that's a good reminder to folks that, the board docs is available to the public. So that's where you will find the meetings recorded. You will also find the answers when there have been questions that have come up that when we get the answers back from staff and others. And we are also working to be certain that those can also be available on the system's website. So please, get in there and start to look at the information that is available. In terms of meetings, I just want to share with you the upcoming meetings. I've been mentioning this one, so I'll say it again. The special public board meeting on Thursday, May the 13th. There are two items that the board will be voting on at that meeting. A charter application and also the budget. Then the operations committee, and that meeting begins at 6 p.m. I'm sorry. The operations committee meeting will be on May the 18th at 10:30. The policy committee meeting is also on May the 18th at 3:30. Parent and Community Advisory Board (PCAB) meets on May the 20th at 6:30, and the next public board meeting, next board meeting, regular board meeting will be on Tuesday, May the 25th. Then there will be a new charter application work session. You heard that tonight as we got the announcement of the two applications. That'll be on May the 26th. And Teaching and Learning Committee will meet again on June the 1st. So these are also listed in board docs and on the calendar for the system. So we encourage you. These are all still virtual meetings to join us if you can. If there is no other, I see a hand, Commissioner McFadden. Did I?
One last thing.
Go ahead.
Commissioner Reed has a birthday on Saturday. So happy early
Oh,
birthday to you, Commissioner Reed. You see his, I don't think he was expecting it. You see his face. He's acting as if he's not.
When you get
so do
when you get when you get to be
do
my
you
age,
want
you
to lead
cancel
us in
culture, you cancel birthday.
early
My birthday is, I think it's Friday, but it's canceled for lack of.
Well, happy early birthday, Commissioner Reed.
Thank
yes.
you.
Happy birthday.
Happy
Thank you.
birthday.
Appreciate
Yes.
it.
As my grandson would say, we have to sing for you so you can, have your cake.
No, that's
So
okay.
even
Thanks anyway. Thanks anyway.
enjoy. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Is there a okay? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
It's not dark outside yet either.
I'm amazed at that. Is there any opposition to this motion to adjourn?
Only Jeanette.
Only- If not, then this motion passes and the meeting will be adjourned. I want to thank everyone. We had excellent presentations this evening, excellent conversation and discussion. Thank you all. Thank you to the public who has joined us. Please, everyone, take some time to go outside and enjoy the last of the beautiful spring sunlight that's there. And we will see you on Thursday if you can join us. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Night.
Good
Good
night,
night.
everybody.
Good
Good
night.
night.